Welcome to Rodman Public Library. Today we are honored to have Harry W. Trombitas with us. He is an Alliance native here in Ohio. You graduated from Alliance in 1974. Went on to the Ohio State University, where he received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Criminal Justice, and then a Master's degree in Counseling and Psychology in 1982 from Creighton University. Harry became an FBI agent in 1983. He was assigned to the Omaha, St. Louis, and New York divisions before transfer to the Columbus office in December 1991. Worked predominantly violent crime, including bank robbery, kidnapping, serial murder crimes against children, criminal profiling, threat assessment, and he also served as the FBI spokesperson until his retirement from the Bureau in 2012.
It's one of my family members.
That's a good reminder to silence your cell phones if you can. Other positions that Harry has held include System Vice President of Security Operations at Ohio Health, Director of the Police Executive Leadership College for the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police, Sociology Lecturer at the Ohio State University, and author of the Dark Places series, a 4-book true crime series devoted to some of the interesting cases that Harry worked over his 29-year career in the FBI. And I know that we have most of them here, I believe, in our True Crime Junkies book club. Some members are here. That was their book, last month, Liz?
Yes.
Yes. So he's here to talk about that, and here's Harry.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay if I'm like this, or do you want me, tied to the microphone? Is that better? That's better? Okay.
We're all.
I am too, remember. So when we get to the point about asking questions, I may have to have someone relay what was said. So anyway, as you can tell from Jack's introduction of me, I clearly am the cream of the crop. The top of the bottom, the best of the worst. So I really appreciate everybody being here, and I want to make this as interactive as possible. So as we go through, if you have any questions in that, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask. I thought I would start off really by just telling you how I started writing this book, or these books, I should say. Sorry. I have, quiet down. I had no intention of ever writing any books, and but I worked so many interesting cases over my career, and I had so many people say, some of your cases have been on Discovery Channel, FBI files, some of those things, and it'd really be cool to hear what it was like to work the investigations. So I think Barb, and I'll introduce Barb, my wife, of 47 years back there. She kept the family going a lot when I was gone and that, and I cannot overstate her importance in that to not only me but my family. And before I forget, I want to thank Jack again for all your effort in that, putting this together and that. So thank you again. But so I never had any intention of writing any books, but again, people were saying to do it. And Barb probably was the last straw. I think she said she'd leave me if I didn't write. So I sat down over the course of about 3.5 years, and I wrote 3-4 hours a day, several days a week, and ended up after about 3.5 years with a manuscript of 269,000 words.
Wow.
And so now the next step is I have to send the manuscript to the FBI for approval. They have to approve everything that my fellow agent there may be familiar with this. If you want to publish something, you have to get bureau approval. So I sent my manuscript down to the pre-publication unit. And they sent me an email back saying, we'll be back in touch with you in 4 to 5 weeks. Well, a year and a half later, I finally got the okay to go ahead and publish my manuscript. So the next step is finding a publisher, right? And so I talked to some friends that have written some books, and they put me in touch with a couple of publishers. One in particular that I'll just mention, kind of representative of all the publishers I talked to, was a guy out of New York. And I called, I left him a message. He called me back, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Who in the hell is Harry Trombitas, and how are you going to make me money?" I went, "Whoa, hi, nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you." I said, "Well, I'm a retired FBI agent." He goes, "Hey, I just published Cash Patel's book and another book." He said, "What makes you special?" I said, "Well, I don't know that I'm special, but I don't know about Cash and some of the others, but I actually worked the cases in that." And I said, I wrote about what it was like to work them and the interaction with the victims and the subjects and all of that. And I said, a couple of the cases have been on Discovery Channel and FBI files. And he goes, "I'll tell you what, how long is your manuscript?" I said, 269,000 words. He goes, "Jesus!" He said, "That's way too long." He said, "We like to see about 65,000 words per book, so you're going to have to chop your manuscript up into 4 books." And I went, "Okay." And he goes, "I'll tell you what, you publish one book, self-publish one book, and then call me back. We'll see how it sells, and then we can talk from there." So obviously, at that point, I was turned off from this publishing process. So I started looking into self-publishing, and found a friend that had actually published a number of books himself, and he walked me through the process and everything, got it in the right order. We used a company called Ingram Spark, which you send them the material and they put it kind of in book format, and then they make sure that copies go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, and wherever else. So I ended up publishing 4 books, self-publishing 4 books. My friend and I, his name is Adam Davis, pretty well-known author, law enforcement type author. But anyway, he said, "Let's release one book to get people's attention." And because I had written my manuscript kind of in, order, like a timeline. When before I came into the FBI, then my first office, going to the academy, and then my first office in Omaha, then St. Louis, New York City, and then back to Columbus. And he goes, "We need something that's going to catch people's attention." So he said, "Do you have one book maybe that people would maybe be able to read and go, that's something that makes me want to read the series that he's written?" And so I ended up, my first book is about the Thomas Lee Dillon case. I don't know how many of you might remember that case. This is Thomas Lee Dillon was born in Canton and lived in Magnolia, Ohio. And over the course of 3 years, he shot and killed 5 outdoorsmen with a high-powered rifle. He would always pick and choose his victims, make sure nobody else was around. After he fired his shot, and sometimes multiple shots, but usually just one, he would pick up his shell casings, and then leave the area. And there was never any connection between Dillon and his victims. And so I didn't start working on the case until the 4th victim. Claude Hawkins was shot and killed on government property in Wills Creek Dam out in Coshocton. And I went out there and I started, the lead detective on it was Dane Shryock. And Dane and I started working together, and he took me out to the crime scene where Claude was fishing, and somebody shot and killed him. And on the way back, he goes, you know, I kind of remember we've had like 3 other homicides in other counties over the last couple of years. He said Tuscarawas County, Belmont County, and Muskingum County. And he said, I don't think those cases have ever been solved. So Dane and I got in contact with the investigators from those agencies, and we had a big task force meeting. And everybody came, brought their case files, and we started comparing notes, between their cases and our case. And each and every case was pretty much the same. Somebody off by themselves, either hunting or fishing, alone, no witnesses, shot and killed with a high-powered rifle, and no shell casings. There was no evidence left behind. So I had my training in profiling down at the FBI Academy. Under some of you may have heard of John Douglas and Roger DePue and Ressler and Lanning and all those guys. They're kind of like the ones that started the profiling unit, if you will. And I had been down there and had some training, and I still had contacts there in the unit. And we had a couple of agents come out, and they agreed with us. They thought the cases were related. So we decided to come up with a profile of who we thought our shooter was. And based on the information that we had, we came up with probably a white male. How did we know that? The area where these homicides occurred were predominantly white areas. Okay, if it was a minority person, chances are good somebody would have observed them and may have said, no, I'm not used to seeing somebody, here in the area that's a minority. And so we came up with a white male. We figured that because he was crime scene savvy, this was not a crime committed by a juvenile, like somebody out, gangbanger kind of person, just out randomly shooting them. They knew enough about, being disciplined not to shoot when other people were around, and they knew enough to pick up their shell casings and that. So we figured that this person was probably mature, and we put him roughly 30s to 40s of age. Then we figured, okay, he's mature, and the homicides all occurred on the weekend with the exception of one. One was the day before Thanksgiving. And a lot of you maybe that are familiar with hunting know that a lot of people take off Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And so because he wasn't killing during the week, we figured he had a job. So we figured that he was, successfully employed. And because he was more mature, had a job, we assume, we figured he had a family, probably a wife and maybe some kids. So anyway, make a long story short, we put this profile together. And by now, the media was all over these cases. I mean, they picked up that we thought that we had a serial killer on our hands. And so we released the profile to the media with the intention of getting people to call in anybody that they suspected. And, as you would expect in a lot of cases, we got calls from disgruntled ex-wives and girlfriends calling in their boyfriends and their ex-husbands. But we were able to clear those leads out pretty quickly. But we got a call from a guy by the name of Doug Fry. And Doug said, hey, so I read the profile, he said, I work with a guy, I'm actually friends with him, by the name of Tom Dillon. He said, I've been out with Tom driving around. He drives all over the state of Ohio, southeastern Ohio, eastern Ohio. I've been with him when he shot dogs and cats and vandalized like electric meters and things like that. And he said, I've even been out with him once or twice when he shot horses and cows with bows and arrows. And he has an extreme interest in these cases. Matter of fact, I think he's actually subscribed to one of the newspapers. And Tom said to me one day when we were driving around, he goes, you know why the person responsible hasn't been caught? It's because he's killing these individuals in different counties. And a lot of times law enforcement doesn't talk to each other across counties. Now keep in mind, this is back in the 80s, early 90s when, communication is a lot different now today. But back then, a lot of that was true. There was not a lot of communication going by. And I think the agencies that had victims were thinking they might have been hunting accidents. And, because occasionally we hear about that. Somebody gets shot, killed, and turned out to be a hunting accident and that. So, anyway, he brings up the name Tom Dillon. So, we assign it to Walt Wilson, the lead to Walt Wilson. Walt was on our task force, and he was a detective with the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office at the time, but later became the sheriff, actually. But Walt's job was to check out Tom Dillon. The rest of us all had a list of people that we were supposed to check out. We'd come back to the task force the next day and we'd say, I've cleared my people out, how about you? And everybody else would say, yeah, me too. And then Walt would go, I can't clear Dillon out. He was off. I checked with his supervisor. He was off on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. He has the weekends off. We know that he has a keen interest in the cases. And he goes, everything I've checked, I can't clear him out. So we decided that Dillon became our number one suspect. And so we set up surveillance on him. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to follow a friend or a family member from point A to point B. Just follow me, we'll go down here and then we'll make a right. Well, then you get stuck at the light, right? and the next thing you know, you've lost them. Well, that's just people that want you to follow them, right? Well, here's somebody that obviously doesn't want people to be on him. And we're out in a rural area. Now, I work surveillance in New York following organized crime guys like John Gotti and some of the other ones around. And they're dry cleaning. We call it dry cleaning all the time. Pulling off into a parking lot to see who goes by, and then they pop on, or do a U-turn, that kind of stuff. But there's plenty of cover. Lots of cars around, people around. But here out in the rural areas, there's nobody. It's you and the subject you're following. So you can't have 4 FBI cars lined up behind. They'd probably go, no, that's a little strange. So we had to have the airplane come up and help us. And when you have the airplane up, you, being the surveillance team, can drop way back and let the plane call it, okay, he's down to the next intersection, he's making a right. So you don't have to be right on top of them and risk getting exposed. So, but because of that, there were 2 factors that made surveillance every day just a nail biter. Number 1, what happens if we're following Dillon and we're staying back and he decides to shoot and kill somebody else before we can get there and stop him? So that was causing everybody a lot of consternation. How can we justify knowing that maybe Tom Dillon's our subject and, you know, we let him shoot somebody, you know? So that was one thing. Second thing is, every day that we were on him, and we were on him 7 days a week, you know, about 16 hours a day probably. We found out when he went home in the evenings, he stayed home. And of course, there are not a lot of hunters out in, you know, the evenings and early morning hours. So, but he would, every day that he'd leave his house, he would drive to a dairy mart. And we witnessed him picking up, buying beer. And so he put it in his red pickup truck, and get in and drive around. So now we know we have an individual who's bought beer, probably drinking in his vehicle. You know, how can we let him drive and go left of center and wipe out a family? You know, that was something we, you know, it's hard to even think about, but we had to face that. The good news, if you will, is that Dillon drove, never sped, went the speed limit, never weaved, never did anything like that. So we felt comfortable that as long as we could keep a rough eye on him and watch, make sure that he wasn't starting to drive erratic, that we could let him go and see what he was up to. So we did, and we were on Dillon for quite a while. And one thing I wanted to mention is that we always had an ace in our back pocket. Tom had been in a park somewhere around Canton and had been caught by a park ranger with a silencer on his weapon. And to have a silencer is a federal violation. So he got arrested by the park ranger, and ATF took the case over. And to make a long story short, he was given probation with the understanding that he would not have any more weapons, not be involved in any more weapons. So we knew that at any point if we saw Dillon with a weapon, we could arrest him and get him off the street. Otherwise, everything is just circumstantial, right? Yeah, he drives around. Yeah, he was off duty, you know, not working the days the homicides took place. But we didn't need more than that to lock somebody up. So we continued surveilling him. Found out that he did, in fact, subscribe to a couple of the papers, Times Leader and some of the other ones where homicides took place. And one time, we followed him up to Cleveland, to the IX Center, and to a gun show that was out there. And we went in and we watched him purchase a handgun. And that was the violation that we had, right? So we knew at any point we could arrest him. But we wanted to keep following him to see if we could find out any new information. Well, we followed and followed and followed. We couldn't come up with really anything new. So we decided that we would approach him and try to interview him. And remember, I had said I had my profiling, interviewing, profiling, training and everything. So we decided that myself and Walt Wilson would, one of the mornings that Dillon drove to the dairy mart to purchase his beer, we would go ahead and approach him at that point and try to interview him. And we would have ATF on the side lot. They're the ones with the arrest warrant, you know, because it was their case. And if Dillon refused to cooperate with us and be interviewed, then we'd give the signal and ATF could come in and arrest him. And at least we got him off the streets. And we can move to phase 2 of the investigation, which I'll tell you about here in just a second. So anyway, where do we interview him? Okay, what's close to the dairy mart? Well, it turned out right across the street there's an architectural building, just a small one. And we went up inside the architectural building. I badged him. I said, I'm so-and-so with the FBI. It's my partner Walt, and with the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office, and we'd like to borrow your building. And he said, well, when do you want it? And we said, well, how about Saturday? And they go, good, we're closed on Saturday. You can have, here's the key, you can have them. And we said, is there any place we could put pictures and maps and things up on the walls and on the table? Yeah, we have a lunchroom downstairs that would be perfect for that. So the plan then was that we would go ahead and we would do a search warrant. As soon as Dylan left his residence, we would do a search warrant at his residence. We'd have a team there. We'd have a team at his workplace. Oh, I didn't even tell you that he worked for Canton Water Works as a draftsman. I can't believe I forgot that. And his supervisor said, Tom was a brilliant guy. He could have my job, but he's too lazy. And so, anyway, so we were going to do a search warrant there. And then Walt and I would approach him in Dairy Mart parking lot. So Saturday morning came, Dylan leaves, search warrant there, search warrant up at the business. We see Dylan coming down the road, pulls into the Dairy Mart. We see him go inside. I pull my car up behind Dylan's red pickup truck so he can't flee. And Walt and I sit there, and we see Dylan coming with his bag of beer towards the front exit there. And we get out of our car, and I walked up to Dylan and I said, Mr. Dylan, my name's Harry Trombitas. I'm with the FBI. This is my partner, Walt Wilson. He's with the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office. We'd like to talk to you. We think we have some things you'd be interested in. And you should have seen his jaw just about hit the pavement. And he goes, okay. I'm thinking to myself, this is not working. There's no way this is going to work. And he puts his beer down and he starts walking with Walt and I to the edge of the parking lot to go across the street to the architectural building, where we had put pictures and maps and everything. The reason why we did that was because when you're interviewing somebody about a homicide or a significant case, you want to get their emotions back up in the state where they committed the crime. And we figured he'd be so fascinated by what we were showing him, the surveillance pictures, the crime scene photos and everything, that it would bring him up to that level where we would be able to successfully interview him. So anyway, we walk to the edge of the parking lot, he stops and he says, I think I need to call my attorney. We went, okay, gave the signal. Joe from ATF and his partner came in, arrested Dylan. They take him to Stark County Jail. So Walt and I then, we go back to the architectural firm, and we're taking all the stuff off the walls and the maps and the crime scene photos and put them in this box that I had and clean up and leave the key where we're supposed to. And now we go down to a little restaurant where our bosses are all at, having breakfast and coffee and enjoying themselves. And so we walk in, we tell them what happened, and of course we feel like beaten puppies, right? We're like, man, we blew it. We had a chance and we blew it. And I mean, both Walt and I felt awful. And of course our bosses are going, no, don't look at it that way. You guys did the best you could. And all of a sudden, Walt's cell phone rings. And he goes, okay, we'll be right there. And it was the Stark County Jail calling. And they go, Dylan wants to talk to you. And we're like, holy mackerel. This is great. We got another chance. So Walt and I jump in my car and we take off and we start heading to the Stark County Jail. We call the prosecutor because, as most of you probably know, once somebody has said they want to talk to an attorney, we can't keep, wow, we want to talk to you, and once they say they want an attorney, we can't talk to them. But there's a rule that says if the subject initiates the contact with you and wants to talk to you, and they understand that they're waiving their rights to the attorney, we can talk to them. And we confirm that with the prosecutor, and we got the green light to go ahead and interview Dylan. And so we go to the Stark County Jail. We sit in a room. We're interviewing Dylan. He comes in and we introduce ourselves, and we're doing everything we can to get him to confess. I mean, we're showing pictures, all the pictures that we had up on the walls, and maps, and the surveillance pictures we took of him. We're putting them down in front of him. He's eating it up, and he starts to get to a point where I think he's going to maybe confess. And I'm pushing him, and he finally gathers himself. He says, it would serve no purpose at this time for me to say anything. And those words echoed in my little pea brain up here, because Dylan had been writing, the killer, we didn't know it was Dylan at the time, had been writing letters or wrote a letter to the Times leader, indicating that he was the killer of one of the victims, Jamie Paxton. And in that letter, he indicated that he could go seek professional help, but it would serve no purpose at this time. And once I heard Dylan in the interview room say, those words, I went, I'm 100% sure we got the right guy here. Because when you're an investigator, even if you have a lot of evidence in that, until you actually hear a defendant or your subject admit that they're the one responsible, there's just a little tiny speck of doubt. And to hear him say that removed all doubt. And so we now had him off the street. We moved to phase 2, and that was identifying any weapons in that Dylan may have bought or sold that we could trace back to the homicides. And we get a call. It was December 4th, 1992. We get a call from Al Cope in Canton. And Mr. Cope says, hey, I saw you're looking for weapons Dylan may have sold. I actually bought a Swedish Mauser from him, rifle. And I still have it. I have the ATF form that he had to fill out with his name, date, time that we purchased it. And it happened to be the date of we had our 5th homicide. Gary Bradley was killed on the same date. And it caused me a little bit of panic at first, because I'm wondering, if Dylan's our guy, how could he kill Gary Bradley down in Noble County, drive all the way up to Massillon to the gun show, sell the weapon to Mr. Cope? But it turned out he killed Gary Bradley in the morning, and he sold the weapon to Al Cope in the afternoon. So, make a long story short, I got to move on to the other cases, other books in that too. We were able to, our firearms unit down at Quantico was able to positively say that Dylan, the weapon that we recovered that was sold by Dylan to Mr. Cope, 100% match to the homicide of Gary Bradley in Noble County, and about a 99% match to Claude Hawkins' homicide. So now we felt relatively comfortable that we could go after him at least on those 2 cases. And when, in the state of Ohio, we would have been able to seek the death penalty. And so we didn't have anything on the other 3 homicides, but we knew based on circumstances and, just method of operation and all of that, that he was probably responsible for the other three as well. But we weren't there at that point. Well, Dylan, at some of his hearings and things, he starts wanting to talk to me. And so, I clear it with his attorney, and of course his attorney's not happy that Dylan wants to talk to me, but, I do, and we start developing a relationship. We started in the Stark County Jail. And he said, I really appreciated the way you guys treated me in the interviews and that, and I appreciate the way you're going about things now. And he basically ended up telling me, he said, I'll tell you what, I could spend the rest of my life in prison, but I need to be in general population because I want access to newspapers, TV, books, all the things that he could entertain himself with throughout the day. He said, if I get the death penalty and they put me on death row, I don't have access. I'm locked down 23 out of 24 hours. I don't have access to those things, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life that way. So anyway, again, a long story short, we worked with his attorneys. Dylan agreed to confess to all 5 homicides. Of course, he had to give us all the information that would prove to us that he was responsible. And we could clear him up for the other 3 families, all 5 families, which was important. By now we were friends and, we cared about, obviously, the victims' families and that. Their loved ones were taken from them. And so everybody was in agreement that we go ahead and drop the death penalties back, and with the understanding that Dylan confessed all 5 homicides and spent the rest of his life in prison. Dylan pled guilty, was given 5 consecutive life sentences. There's a lot more to the story. I hope, if you haven't read the book, that you take a look at it, and I think you'll find it very interesting. Yes, ma'am?
You had a chance to interview and spend time with a serial killer. What are your thoughts about minds that do such acts? Do you think it's environmental? Is it, are they born that way? Or what are their thoughts?
Well, typically, and we've studied serial murderers, killers, typically they have some, they show some different behaviors. One is they're typically arsonists. For whatever reason, they like to burn things and then sit back and watch the reaction of the people that own the property, the law enforcement, and the fire department that show up. So we often see serial murderers have some kind of arson in their background. In Dylan's case, I'll just mention this since you brought it up, he confessed to 150 arsons. Now, you're going, oh, there's no way, but let me tell you, way, because the day that he went through all the arsons, he literally, we would bring in somebody from a county, they'd have a map of all their arsons. Dylan would look at it and he'd go, I committed an arson here, 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 here. And they go, you're right about those, but we didn't have an arson here. And Dylan would go, oh yeah, you did. Go back and talk to the property owner. And they'd go back and talk to the property owner and find out, yeah, in fact, they had a building that was burned. They just didn't report it. They didn't think it would do any good.
Was this before he started killing? Or the arson?
Probably before and during.
Okay.
Also, animal killing, animal cruelty is another thing that we see in serial murders and that. In Dylan's case, he was examined by Dr. Jeffrey Smalden, one of the best forensic psychologists around. And Dylan came back, high IQ, 140 some, IQ, and he was antisocial, but he did not have a mental illness. And when we talked to Tom about why he did it, he would say, I don't know. He said, when I left home that day, I didn't know I was going to kill anybody, but I'd be driving along and I'd see somebody and I'd just kind of hear a voice or something inside me say, go back and get him. And so anyway, Dylan ended up being sent to Lucasville. We remained our contact. I always suspected that maybe he might have done some other things, but he kept assuring that those were the only 5 homicides he committed. And so I went down to see him a number of times. He wrote me letters and all that kind of stuff. And if you read the book, I think I put in there what the letters say and things. But Dylan, and I was sitting at home one day reading the paper, and I get a call from somebody saying that, hey, did you hear Dylan died? I said, no. But apparently Dylan developed cancer and ended up dying. I want to say it was 2011 or 2011, I think. So anyway, what's that?
So that's what, once in a, where you guys, when the plane was up in the air,
The jogger?
and you guys were following them, wasn't there a girl driving?
Yeah, no, not a girl. It was a jogger, female jogger.
Okay,
Let me
yes.
tell you this story. Go ahead with your
I'm telling you what, you had me on my seat. I mean,
No, you should have seen me.
I'm like, oh my God,
All right.
you could not have killed her.
Let-
Don't kill her. I mean, oh.
Well,
Lord
thank you
have
for
mercy.
saying that. I'll just mention this real quick. But I mentioned to you, about how we were on pins and needles following Dylan around. We had to be close enough we could stop him from shooting somebody and, worried about him drinking. This one time, we're following Dylan. The plane is up calling out, okay, Dylan's making a right-hand turn. He's going down. Oh, appears to be a jogger in the roadway. I mean, keep that in mind. There's nobody around. This is out in rural, Ohio. And we're going, oh my. And the plane goes, okay, it looks like a woman. She's a female jogger. She's jogging. She's all by herself. And I had Dane in the car with me. And I'm like, holy shit. Sorry for swearing. But I probably said worse in the car. But I had my finger, I put my finger on, we had the siren, to flip it. Hopefully that would help prevent him. And I had a red light that I put on my car. And, hopefully we'd be able to move in and prevent it. Well, the plane's going, okay, he's slowing down next to the jogger, and we're going, oh my God. And honestly, we're just beside ourselves. And, I'm yelling at the plane, do you see any kind of weapon? Is he getting out of his car? No, he's driving past the jogger. And he's going down to the next intersection. And we're going, oh, thank you, God. Thank you. And, all right, Dylan's making another right-hand turn. He's coming back the other direction. And then, all right, Dylan's making another turn, and he's squaring the block. He's going back towards the jogger. By the time he does that, the jogger is at the stop sign at the next intersection. She turns left. Dylan comes down and stops at the stop sign and just sits there. It's like in his mind, I thought, he's going to go get her or not. And all of a sudden he turns right. He goes away from the jogger. So, yeah, there are a number of those things. Yes?
Am I remembering right that one of those murders happened in Pike Township? Pike Township?
Pike?
No,
Where?
I remember.
What county?
I might have been Tuscarawas County.
That's possible. I'm not familiar with the townships.
Oh, okay. Because when that
Yeah.
happened, I remember being.
Township is in Stark County.
That's
There's,
Well, Lower Canton going down into the east part of Menlo.
it's not in Stark. We didn't have any
Yeah,
homicides in
that's
Stark.
correct.
Just so you know.
No.
All right, anything else before I move on to the next? Because I want to, where's Jack? Jack, how much time do I have, brother?
There's nothing else going on in this room.
All right. Don't let anybody out. Huh? Oh, I know you do.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to get through. My cousin. My cousin. All right, anyway, what did I do now? There we go. All right. And Cindy, leave whenever you have to, obviously. I appreciate you being here. We got a family reunion right after this in Silver Park, so she's got to get stuff ready and all that. So anyway, the second book on the market, if you will. Oh, and I didn't finish telling you the story. So I self-published, right? You go through Ingram's Park. They send it to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Amazon and Barnes & Noble set the prices for the books, okay? So I would have set it at, $5 or something like that. They set it on each book at $16.99. And it's only available in paperback. But I want you to know, out of that $16.99, I make a whopping $3.14. Cindy, I had to pay the guy that helped me. If I could just recoup my, we're still in the hole, trust me. What the heck? Anyway, I just wanted you guys to know that I'm not here making, millions of dollars on it. Stephen King has nothing to worry about. Let's just put it that way. But, all right, so book 2, then I go back to the FBI Academy, what I did prior to the FBI, going to the FBI Academy, kind of what it was like to actually be an agent that went through new agent training, some of the funny stuff that happened. Then going to my first office of assignment, my very first case was, I called it the Pheasant Hunters. It was another serial murder case. We had an individual by the name of John J. Joubert, who was an Offutt Air Force airman. Those of you that are familiar with Offutt Air Force bases in Omaha. Anyway, Joubert was a airman, and he went around and he shot and killed, or not, he didn't shot and kill. He kidnapped and murdered 3 young boys over the course of about a year, and then dumped their bodies out in a rural area. 2 of them were in Omaha, 1 of them was in Maine, and where Joubert was stationed before. So I talked to you about what it was like to work that case, and one of the things that that I was assigned to do was to, after Christopher Walden was kidnapped, I was assigned to go to the Walden residence and be there in case there was a ransom demand of any kind, and interact with the family. We like to have a liaison between the family and investigators. So I spent time with Sue and Steve Walden. Steve was a lieutenant colonel. Sue was a stay-at-home mom. And just tell you this real quick, tug at your heartstrings a little bit. Chris wanted to walk to school all the time, and his mom, Sue, would not let him. She would take him every single day. Finally, it was a beautiful December morning. Chris is like, please, Mom, let me walk to school like the other kids. So she let him go, and when you know that's the day that he gets kidnapped. And anyway, I was with the family for 3 days before we found Chris's body. And, you can kind of read about the interaction I had with the family in that book, but we ended up being able to hold Joubert accountable. He was convicted and was actually put to death in the electric chair. so he's no longer with us. St. Louis Express, I got transferred from Omaha to St. Louis, and I was put on an undercover car theft case, and I talked about what it was like to work on that, and dealing with the bad guys, and you know, processing the vehicles, and there was, I don't know if you guys knew, but the parts of a car are actually worth more money than the car itself. That's why there's what they call chop shops or salvage yards, where they break the cars apart and then sell the components. And so we were able to arrest, I forget how many, 50 to 70 auto thieves, shut down 12 chop shops, and it's kind of an interesting read. The JIDs, I was on the FBI director's detail. He used to live in St. Louis, William Webster. He later became the head of the CIA. And anyway, make a long story short, I would pick him and a fellow agent up at the airport in St. Louis and run them out to the family farm, which was between St. Louis and Kansas City, midway through. And I'd get them checked in at the house there, at the farmhouse, and make sure the alarms were working and everything. And Judge Webster would walk me out to the car every day, you know, when I was going to drop them off. And he'd thank me and everything. And one day he goes, Harry, do you know anything about the JIDs? I said, the who? He said, the JIDs, you know, the mother-daughter country group. I said, oh, you mean the Judds? He said, yeah, that's it. Anyway, his son Bill was a big fan of the Judds. And Judge Webster asked me to go check out their Judds were going to be playing at the county fair, and he wanted to know how he could buy tickets and all that. I arranged all that. It was kind of fun. One of the other things I mentioned in the book is being on his detail. I got to go to 2 World Series games. Sat in Peter Uberov's commissioner's box. It was Judge Webster, Peter Uberov, me, and some guy by the name of Stan the Man Musial. If you've ever heard of him, probably the greatest baseball player that ever lived in St. Louis. I mean, best Cardinal ever.
Wow.
I talk about my New York experience, again, on an organized crime squad, following guys like Gotti and Tommy Karani around, and you know, just how crazy that was, and then end up getting my office of preference back to Columbus. After you've been in the FBI for a while, you've done your big city time, they let you put your name on a list where you'd like to spend the rest of your career. And Barb and I wanted to come back to Columbus because a lot of our families from around there, so decided that we wanted to come back. I got lucky, and after only 6 years of being in New York, and by the way, we couldn't afford a house in, matter of fact, I'll just tell this. In Omaha and St. Louis, we managed to save a whopping $15,000. Okay? So now we're getting transferred to New York. And I'm thinking, babe, we're going to get a palatial estate along the Hudson River. No, we meet with our real estate agent. She goes, $15,000, that's not even enough for closing costs. We're like, oh my God. So she's taking us way down South Jersey. We walked into one home, and I'm not exaggerating, I mean, she's here. We walk in through the back door, and we walk into the kitchen. There is no flooring. It's dirt. You can see the rafters, but there's no, that's what we could afford. Back then, an agent in New York made the same amount of money as an agent in Columbus or Omaha or wherever. And eventually we got a cost of living increase. Anyway, so we had to end up buying out in the Pocono Mountains. And so I had a 90-mile commute just to the George Washington Bridge or the Holland or Lincoln tunnels. And then, of course, because we were undercover, we weren't allowed to report to the office at 26 Federal Plaza. So we had to go out to wherever we were going to start following our bad guys around. So that could be Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island. So it could be another half hour, 45 minutes, maybe even longer. So just to give you an idea, we had to get there's a bureau rule, we had to get an oil change every 3,000 miles. I was getting an oil change every 2 weeks. And hey, you know, what am I going to do, complain? What are they going to do? They're put me, you know, okay, go to the office. Then I've got to find a way to get from Poconos to the office downtown, worry about parking, and, you know, at least I had an FBI car that I could drive back and forth. All right, bank robberies, I just mentioned. One thing I noticed when I got to Columbus, we had a lot of bank robberies. We averaged over 100 bank robberies a year in Columbus. And more than some big cities like New York. I think in 1 year, our high year was 137 in 1993. We had more bank robberies than New York. And so anyway, we would try to get, you know, the bank surveillance pictures on TV or in the newspaper. And many of you may know that the bank surveillance pictures, especially back then, were awful. You know, we get these crystal clear pictures of something on Mars, but to get a bank robber, you know, in the lobby of a bank or credit union, apparently that's asking a little too much. So anyway, and because we had so many, the media kind of became indifferent about the bank robberies and that. So I saw this, and it occurred to me, we need to do something to try to get attention. So I started naming, I was the bank robbery coordinator, and we started naming the bank robberies. And it was always based on what the victim teller or a witness said. I never had to make anything up. And for example, I'd go and interview somebody that was robbed, and she would go through the description, and I always finished up with, is there anything else that you want to tell me? Oh my God, this person had the worst breath ever. So I named that person the Bad Breath Bandit. And I sent it out to the media. Oh, they loved it. Oh my God, they were all over. Then, you know, I just continued to do that. And, you know, one guy came in to rob a bank. His pants were hanging down below the crack of his butt. You know, we called him, you know, shoot, I just blanked it out. The droopy drawers bandit. Had another guy rob the bank. The witnesses said, yeah, you know, some of his teeth were there and some were missing. So he became the summer tooth bandit. Some are there, some are missing. And then just one other one that I'll mention, you know, and again, there's many more in the book. But we had a bank robbery out in Hilliard, and we went out and interviewed the victims and the witnesses and that. And I was talking to the victim teller, and I said, you know, is there anything else you can tell me about this person? It was a young man. She goes, yes. He looked just like Justin Bieber, only dirty. He became the Dirty Beaver Bandit. And yeah, we had fun with it. I had to walk the line because, you know, a lot of times tellers think they're gonna die. You know, even if they don't see a gun. You know, so but we ended up solving probably over 85, almost 90% of our bank robbers. Most of our bank robbers were serial bank robbers. They go in to get money, and they didn't care how much. Just give me some money. Typically, a bank robber gets $1,000 to $2,000, unless they take over the bank and hit all the drawers or get into the vault, and I talk about those cases as well. But because they don't get a lot of money, they use, and what are they using the money for? Drugs. Absolutely drugs. And so they have a heck of a party over the weekend, but then they'd be back robbing again. And so we may not catch them the first or second time, but the third, fourth, or fifth time we would catch them. And we'd be able to clear up a bunch of bank robberies. So, what's that?
The one bank robbery in Columbus and Ronnie Fletcher was working.
Yeah, I don't remember. Apparently I had a cousin that was, that was actually working at the bank when the bank was robbed. And Cindy reminds me of it, and I, honest to God, I mean, you know, I probably went to over 1,000 bank robberies in my career, so they kind of all run together a little bit. All right, moving on here. Murder, betrayal, and the tragedy of Officer Brian Hurst. Commander Pedro is a story about a white Aryan nation individual who, he and his band of merrymen went around robbing banks throughout the Midwest, and they leave behind fake explosive devices like lunch boxes with wires hanging out of it. And so they get money, then we'd have to clear the bank, bring the fire department in. Anyway, we got a tip that, in fact, his real name was Peter Lange. He was the head of the Aryan Nation group that we were looking for, that he was in Columbus. So we went to arrest him. Make a long story short, we kind of got into a shootout with him. And we arrested him. And he was convicted. He and his partners were convicted. He was sentenced to, I forget how many years, in federal prison. But while he was there, he decided that he wants to transition into a woman. And so, you, the taxpayer, funded Peter Langen's transition into a woman, and he's now known as Donna Langen, and he's in a women's prison. So, just keep that in mind. I've got other cases here. The murder of Ronald Williams. He was just served over in Kosovo, and he comes back, volunteers to hand carry a bag of money into the, actually the checks, and he gets shot and killed. I talk about that case. Murder of Indian Cody Smith out in Champaign County. This is a case where the stepdad claimed that Indian Cody were out playing in the yard, and when he went back out to check on them, they were missing. And he claimed that they must have been kidnapped. But we were able to show, in fact, that Kevin Neal was the individual responsible, the stepdad. He killed them and then dumped their bodies about 7 miles away behind a gravesite, a graveyard. So we were able to take that. Abduction of Ashley Taggart. Here's a young girl, 3 years old, Lancaster, Ohio. Out in the backyard, she gets abducted. Turns out it's a neighbor by the name of Jason Wagner that kept her for 4 days up in an attic. And by the time we figured out who had done it, we were making entry into the attic, and we have Jason there with us in his home. And as we're going up the ladder, he grabs his head and he goes, "Sometimes I do terrible things." When we get up there, the detective shines a flashlight up in the attic, sees what appears to be, Ashley's body, and crawls along the rafters, and sees that she's duct taped around the mouth. Her hands are duct taped in front of her. Her feet are duct taped, and he thinks she's dead, but he shines the light in her eyes and they flicker. So she knows that, or he knows that she's still alive. We were told, of course, we called the squad and everything, and we were told that she was within hours of death due to dehydration and that, so. Anyway, read about that case. Jason's no longer with us. He was killed in prison by a roommate, so there you go. Every once in a while, we have a case like the Erica Baker case where we do everything right in the investigation. We still cannot find her. And we know, we truly believe, and you have to read this chapter to understand what I'm talking about, but we believe that she was killed and she was dismembered, but we can't find her body. And one of our goals as investigators, and I've done a lot of interviews on the Nancy Guthrie case, and I will tell you, one of our goals is we want to bring that person back to the family, preferably alive, but if nothing else, at least their body back, so that they have some kind of closure. She's still missing. We don't know where she's at. Murder of Emily Murray. This is a Kenyan college girl that was murdered by another serial murderer. Talk about that case. Murder of Summer Inman. This is a young woman in Logan, Ohio that was having difficulties with her husband, and they were separated, and the husband and his mom and dad felt that they would lose custody of the two children. So they wanted to allegedly kidnap her and talk to her about not, taking custody of the children. But when they abducted her, she was cleaning a bank, and she was in the evening, and she was taking the trash out, and they were there, and they used a stun gun and dragged her into a car, and they put a zip tie around her neck, and unfortunately they pulled it too tight, and she was strangled. And so they panicked and they put her body down a cistern at a church just outside of Logan. So you can read about that case if you're interested. The murder of Officer Brian Hurst. This is again another tragedy. Brian was a great officer, Columbus police officer, working special duty at a bank. And he was behind the counter talking with employees and that, and in comes Daryl Lawrence. And he immediately pushes people to the ground, runs up to the counter near where Brian is standing, and is firing as he's running. Brian's able to duck down, but Daryl comes over the counter and fires around, and it enters his neck area just above his vest and severs his aorta. But Brian's able to fire off a couple of shots, actually blew off a couple of Daryl's fingers, which we were able to recover in the bank and use that for DNA in that. And we eventually got Daryl. And book 4, just finished with this. Matthew Hoffman, I don't know if any of you heard about this case. This is a case from Mount Vernon, Ohio, where Hoffman breaks into a home, allegedly to burglarize the home. He ends up killing 2 women, a young boy, the family dog, dismembers them in the bathtub, kidnaps the 13-year-old girl, Sarah, keeps her tied up while he's finishing dismembering her. And Matthew puts the remains of the women and the young boy and the dog in 7 garbage bags. And he happened to be a tree trimmer at the time, so he still had his tree trimming equipment. He was familiar with a tree that he fancied up in Kokosing State Park, which is just, I think, north or whatever direction it is. There was a tree up there, a 50-foot tree with, and you can kind of see it in the middle top picture there, with a hollowed out center. And he hauled the 7 garbage bags up and dropped them down the center of the tree and kept Sarah, the 13-year-old, at his house for 4 days until we figured out who was responsible, broke into the home, arrested Matthew, and recovered Sarah. She's still alive today. But he had taken leaves, and when I walked into the house, there was a pile of leaves in the living room. Just loose leaves piled up 4 feet high. And I said, because at this time we didn't know where the other people were. We knew where we had recovered Sarah, but we didn't know where the 2 women and the young boy were. And has anybody checked the leaves to make sure they're not in there? Yeah, we looked through them already. And one deputy takes me into the kitchen. There's writing all over the walls, like graffiti kind of stuff. And he opens up the freezer, and there's 3 dead squirrels that apparently Matthew intended to eat at some point. But that kind of turned my stomach a little bit. And then, but he had stapled leaves to the inside of the house because in the winter he didn't really have he didn't have a lot of heat, so he used the leaves as insulation. And so anyway, just a crazy case. We were able to work out a deal, and I remember he wouldn't tell us directly where the bodies were, but he went through his attorney and he drew a map of where the tree was. And I remember following the attorney out. I was with Sheriff Barber from Knox County, and we're driving through these weeds and through, out in the middle of this wooded area, Cocosing State Park, and all of a sudden the attorney stops in front of this tree. He goes, "I think that's the tree." So we're, going, "Yeah, sure." Yeah, but we had our crime scene guys cut a hole in the tree about 6 feet off the ground, stuck a pole in with a mirror, moved it, and he said, "Yeah, I see garbage bags." So we cut a bigger hole in the tree, and one by one we carried out these garbage bags. And in the garbage bags were the remains. And, the things I've seen in my career, I wouldn't wish on anyone, but I mean, we open a bag, a head comes rolling out. Got the one thing that always sticks with me is we open this one bag, and inside the bag is the dog, and it's sitting there smiling. I mean, that image is burned into my brain. It's smiling, and I'm like, wow, and I still remember that like it was yesterday. But anyway, so that was that case. The I-270 case. Remember the DC sniper case where Malvo and Muhammad shot and killed, like 10 people, maybe it's more, I can't remember, in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. Well, we had our own sniper case in Columbus. And it literally almost shut down the entire south side of Columbus. We had one woman, Mrs. Gail Nisley, that was shot and killed. She was with her best friend, Mary Cox. They were 2 grandmothers, and they were on their way to do some shopping, and I think one of them had a doctor's appointment. And they were on the south side of 270 in Columbus, going towards the Circleville exit. All of a sudden, somebody shoots from, nobody knows, we know now where, but the bullet comes in through the driver's side door. Mrs. Cox is driving, narrowly misses her, and we think Gail was leaning forward to adjust the radio or maybe the temperature or something, and she got hit, and it severed her aorta, and she bled out in the car. But we had dozens of similar incidents where we had people that were driving, bullets would fire through their windshield and stick in the headrest, or we had a baby in the back seat of one car and in a car seat. Bullet comes in, it had to miss the baby by this much, stuck in the other side of the door. And we worked that case for 114 straight days. And through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, I mean, that's what we do. We don't stop. We don't stop. And yes?
Yeah, I actually lived on the southeast side of Columbus and worked in Upper Arlington at the time. I was terrified because I had to drive that loop.
Oh, you know, you and so many other people.
Yeah.
I mean, restaurants were really getting hurt because people were afraid to go out, and yeah, it was a big deal. And like I said, it was national news because it came on the heels of the Malvo and Muhammad case. And Columbus has got its own highway shooter now. So, but anyway, it was, we had over 5,700 tips on the case, and we have to follow up each and every tip to its logical conclusion. It was tip number 5,444 that led to the resolution of the case. On paper, it looked like just any other tip. It said, go see Charles McCoy Sr. He's got a son, Charles Jr. There's been some discussion in the family that somehow he might be involved, and we think he also turned over a gun to his dad recently. Well, we'd already test fired over 100 weapons, so that, another gun was a big deal. And so anyway, the two detectives go out to the house, and they're sitting there talking with Senior. Charles Sr. comes to the door. Unbeknownst to us, Charles Jr., our shooter, is coming down the street. He sees the detectives talking to his dad, and he knows he's got to get out of town. So he immediately goes to the ATM machine, withdraws all his money, and leaves town. Well, the detectives recover the gun from Mr. McCoy, thank you. And but the lab is closed for the day. So they have to take it to the property room and store it for the night. And the next morning, they go pick up the gun. And Chief Martin, he and I were the leads on the case. I was the lead for the FBI. He was the lead for the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. We had a task force. But anyway, we're sitting in his office, and we get a call from Mark Hardy at the lab. And Steve says, puts him on speaker, and said, go ahead, Mark. And Mark said, fellas, you got your gun? We're like, 114 straight days, test firing all these guns. We know who did this. And so we put an APB out, all points bulletin out, nationwide bolo for Charles's vehicle and for Charles. 3 days later, I'm laying in bed, Barb and I thought we were sleeping. We're not doing anything, trust me. I gotta embarrass her, right?
Pay for it later.
Oh, yeah, no question about that. Laying in bed, and my phone rings, my cell phone rings. And it's a friend of mine, Scott Bakken from the FBI out in Las Vegas. And he goes, hey, Trom, which is my nickname, Trom. He goes, hey, Trom, we're sitting on your sniper duty. I said, what? He goes, Charles McCoy, he's out here in Las Vegas. We're sitting on his car, and we're waiting for him to come back to his hotel room, and we'll put the habeas corpus on him. Sure enough, about a half hour later, Charles comes back to his room, and they arrest him. And there's so many interesting things about this case. I hope you have an opportunity to read it. Charles was actually a great young man, but he was schizophrenic. And when he didn't take his medicine, he started hearing things, and he started dropping bags of cement off of bridges, and then he graduated to purchasing a firearm and shooting at cars. But he's due to be released in about 5 years. And I hope that he continues to take his medication and that, because he'll be fine. But how we're going to keep an eye on him and making sure he's taking his medication is kind of another story. But the last case I'll just mention, and then I'll let you guys go. I appreciate your patience. Barb and I were coming out of church some Sunday morning, and my cell phone rings, and it brings security, and they go, "Hey Harry, Springs, yeah, what's going on? We think we're going to need you." And I go, "What's going on?" "Well, somebody cut a hole through our roof, dropped down, used some kind of a high-powered torch. It turned out to be a thermal lance. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, about a 10-foot long rod that they pump oxygen through. And they actually use that thermal lance to cut apart bridges and ships and things. It's that powerful. And but they cut a hole in the vault, and there's so much smoke and fire. The police are here, the fire department's here. We can't see what they got. But if they clean this out, they got over $100 million. And I'm like, I'll be right there. Yes. I draw first. Yeah, I think remember that. And so anyway, make a long story short, it turned out to be the Lynn Breakers, guys from Lynn, Massachusetts, led by a mastermind by the name of Sean Murphy, who in my opinion was one of the greatest burglars ever. And he had broken into an EAD on manufacturing place and had stolen like 26 or 27 New York Giants Super Bowl rings. And anyway, he was quite the leader of his little pack there, and he ended up defending himself in federal court, which led to some really interesting back and forth. If you get the book and read it, one of his co-conspirators was testifying against him, and Sean would pretend like he was talking about Mr. Murphy in the third person. Mr. Doucette, you think your Mr. Murphy was doing this, and what did you say Mr. Murphy did next? And at one point, Rocky said, goes, "Sean, quit goofing around. You were right there with me." The jury loses it. The judge is laughing. Anyway, make a long story short, he ended up getting convicted, serving some time, and as far as I know, he's out, and he got rearrested for, I just blanked out where you pretend you're a service person, you're really not.
Stolen ballot.
Yes. Stolen ballot. And so he got rearrested for that. And anyway, folks, again, there's 4 books. Yes, sir.
I wondered, all of the crime shows that show how things are done, doesn't that make it harder for you to get a person because they have all the ideas of how you work?
Well, you're right to a point. It does make it harder. Matter of fact, every time we took someone to a trial, we had to spend about 15 minutes with the jury explaining to them how not in every case is it like what you see on TV, where you get DNA and hair and fingerprints out of every case. It's not like that. So don't think because in this case we didn't get DNA, that doesn't mean that the detectives or the agents didn't do their jobs. So, but as far as, they show some things, fortunately not in a lot of detail in that, and quite honestly, a lot of the criminals aren't spending their time watching these shows. And so,
But like the first case you told about, he picked up his partner's phone. That's not intuitively obvious.
well, you're right. He did. He was a big fan of serial killers. And again, I only gave you a real short synopsis of the case, but yeah, he was a big crime freak, and he knew that if you didn't leave evidence behind for investigators, it would be very difficult to solve if you didn't have any witnesses and if there was no known connection. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Dylan read books. He was really into that. So yeah, some of them do. So you're right. But fortunately, not a lot of them pay attention, or they still commit. They always think they're going to commit the perfect crime, but they can't control, somebody walking in on them, or at the wrong time, or seeing them leave, or happen to call the police about something completely different. So, fortunately, we were able to get most of them. Obviously, some we haven't, but we're not going to stop trying. Yes, sir, ma'am. Sorry, Jeff had his hand up. You're clearly not.
My dad was chief of police in the 60s and 70s, Don Cowan, and he died when I was 10, so I don't know a whole lot about him, but he graduated from the FBI Academy, and I've always wondered what that meant, what that entailed, how long he would have been there. 'Cause I was just a baby.
He would have been in there. I was there almost 5 months. He was, the National Academy is typically about 10 weeks.
Okay.
And you work with professional law enforcement from all over the world. I mean, other countries, and people come in to attend the FBI Academy because it is the premier law enforcement academy in the world.
I know he came back with 4 big
Good for
binders,
him.
and I donated them to the FOP a few years back.
Not everybody, you have to be hand-selected by your department.
Oh, okay.
So you can't, if I'm just a regular officer or whatever, detective, I can't just say, I'm gonna go to the FBI Academy. You have to be nominated by your department. So that's quite a,
I've got several letters from Jay as your correspondence between him and my dad that I still have.
That's quite
But I
a-
always wondered, my family, the rest of my family don't have, so I don't have any reference.
they go through a lot of the same training, not exactly the same training, but much of the same training that we do.
Okay.
But it's abbreviated. They got to cram it in 10 weeks versus 5 months.
Well, I've always been interested in law enforcement and crimes. Dateline's my favorite show.
Well, you watch.
So this is
Yeah, I don't
very
watch many.
interesting.
We don't watch many crime shows. The Dateline,
Yeah.
the one I'll tell you then, Jeff. I'll get to your question. By the way, Jeff, what was it?
52.
52 years ago today, Jeff joined the Navy. So, my neighbor, loved his family. His mom's here, the sister. We got it all going on here. But, one of my favorite people from back here. But go ahead, Jeff.
Is there any one single event that you never solved that just still eats at you?
That we've solved?
That you didn't solve?
Well, I think the Erica Baker case, probably the kidnapping of the girl out in Kettering, that we've never brought her home. That one, continues to bother me, and the other investigators that we're working in. Other than that, for the most part, we were able to, and our goal, and I hope if you read the books, you see a theme throughout my books, and that is that I was no superstar. These books are not about me. These books are about the team effort that all the investigators working together to hold the bad guys accountable and bring justice to the victims. That's what it's about. And for the most part, I think we did a pretty good job of doing that. But the Kettering case still, we'd love to bring Erica back to her family. And, unfortunately at this point, she's not.
I see that you worked on the case where they made the movie Catch Me If You Can about the guy that pretended to be an
Oh, Frank Abagnale?
yeah, and then they made that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio in it.
Yeah, did you read the book, that part in there?
I
talk about
haven't had the pleasure of reading your book
Oh,
yet.
okay, well-
I've seen the movie.
in my one book, I talk about Frank Abagnale. Frank was the subject of Catch Me If You Can. The fraudster guy that could, weasel his way onto an aircraft as a pilot, and Just incredible stuff. But Frank Abagnale was kind of like the top, of his class of criminals, if you will. And when we caught him, and part of his punishment was that when the FBI wanted him to do a presentation at a conference, he would have to come and do it. So every year I had a financial crime conference in Columbus. We brought people in from all over the state, financial people in banking and credit unions, etc. And I got Frank Abagnale to come and do a presentation. And I talk about this in my book, but Frank shows up, he's with an agent who brings him in. I introduce myself to him. I said, "Can I help you with anything?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Can you take," he had two brochures basically. One was bigger, one was little. He said, "Can you take these around and put them on everybody's desk for me?" And I said, "Sure." So I go in, I put the two brochures down on the desk. There we had 150 seats, and I happened to notice that he's walking behind me, and he stops in front of every desk. He takes the bigger brochure and he puts it, he squares it up, and he takes the little one, he puts it in a certain spot, make sure it's just right. Then he moves on to the next. And I'm thinking, this guy's a freak. But then it occurred to me, this is what made him so good. Paying attention to detail. This guy had to have everything perfect. And when he did his frauds and forgeries and all those kinds of things, that's the way he was. He was so good, he convinced other people that he really was who he said he was. So I put that in my book, and yeah, he was an interesting character to deal with in person.
Very charismatic.
He was, I would call him charismatic. The attendees for his session were very pleased. I would say he was charismatic. Anything else? Oh, yes.
You keep referring to bad guys. How about bad girls?
There were plenty of bad girls. I mentioned, in my book, a number of female bank robbers and that we worked case, the church lady bandit, church lady, the boo-boo bandit. She comes in, gets in line at the teller station, in walks, unbeknownst to her, a Columbus police officer in full uniform stands behind her. She goes up, passes the robbery note to the teller, and the teller's going, but trying not to give it away, and so the policeman behind her kind of realizes something's going on. And anyway, the teller gives the lady money, and as she's turning to leave the bank, she goes, she just robbed me. And so they tackle her outside, and we had to pull the robbery note out of her mouth. And she was trying to eat it and swallow it. But we have the church lady bandit, Sylvette Gilbert, robbed 11 banks. She was the most notorious female bank robber that we had at the time in the United States. And she was called the church lady bandit because I was interviewing a witness and, having him go through a description. I said, anything else? He goes, yeah. She looked like she just came from church. So she became the church lady bandit. But yeah, to answer your question, there are female bad guys, or bad girls. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any thoughts on the law, how it's doing, and where?
Oh, how they're doing now?
And where?
Oh, they're everywhere. First of all, as talking about New York, probably not the same kind of prominence that they once were back in John Gotti's days and some of the other ones, but they're still around. They've moved into the drug world as well, and but they're still around. I mean, we have, mobsters here in Ohio, and and they're around. And another thing we have these groups that come in from like the Yugoslavians and the different countries that come in. You've all heard about MS-13 and some of the bad drug gangs and things that we have. Well, they just leave their country and they come here and they just start their operations here. So we're constantly battling these individuals in that.
So you testified in a lot of cases against these criminals. Did you ever at any time feel threatened that your family was in jeopardy?
No, I honestly didn't think so. And it's kind of hard to describe, but I always treated the bad guys and girls with dignity and respect. They could be somebody that murdered a child, and I may inside just despise this person. But if you're going to talk to them and get information, you can't go in and say, listen, tell me. You've got to learn how to communicate with people. And I always treated all of my bad guys and girls respectfully and with dignity and respect. I had a number of them actually thank me for treating them like a human being rather than something else. And got Christmas cards from someone. Again, that comes with the business. I mean, I'm sure somebody may someday get out of prison. I mean, there's still a number that I put in that they may say, I'm going to kill an SLB. But to my knowledge, no. I mean, the one Indian Cody Smith's Kevin Neal, guy that killed his two stepchildren. I'm not his favorite person, I can tell you that. But I've never gotten a threat or anything from him. And you know what? Bring it on. Hopefully. And that, regarding organized crime, you didn't mess with someone's family. Okay? You targeted your organized crime people. There's another cousin of mine. So I can imagine who. But kind of lost my train of thought. The mob. And you don't mess typically. And one thing, the mob did not want to mess with law enforcement, and kill law enforcement officers because they were already under enough scrutiny from law enforcement. If you can imagine somebody put a hit out on an FBI agent or a police detective or something like that, they knew that, and when I interviewed a couple of these guys, it was kind of a mutual, I don't want to say mutual respect. It was, I know you're trying to do your job. You're doing your job. I don't hate you because you're doing your job, kind of thing. So, again, as long as you treated them, fairly and, dignity, respectfully, I think it was good.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
I would like to know when you're going to write some more books. And then obviously, Barb, I would like to know when you are.
I keep telling her she's got books in her to write. To be honest with you, I think everybody has a book in her. The experiences that you have all gone through in your life, and if you think about some of the unique things that you've done and that, if you just sat down and wrote about it, if not for the public, for your family. I just had an FBI agent that just passed away too. He sat down every day for 2 years straight and wrote about what his day was like, how he interacted with his granddaughter, how much joy that brought. And now he's got this diary thing that he's given to his granddaughter that she can read and cherish for the rest of her life. I mean, you all have done some incredible stuff. And I think, again, for no other reason than just to give it to your family and let them see a side of you maybe that they didn't know. Anything else? Oh, yes.
How did you, after you had a crime, come home and not let it get into your head, or, I mean, like Ohio State football could help you, we know that. But I mean, seriously, how did you just chill out and not let it eat out?
Well, I think one of the things that I did, and Barb can testify to this, I was able to compartmentalize. So the horrible things or the things that I did at work stayed on this side of me. And I didn't bring it up. At home, I was a husband, I was a dad. Took the kids to practice, would coach them, did whatever I could. But tried to keep those thoughts from crossing over. And I think I did a pretty fair job throughout my career of keeping them separated. So, not everybody can do that though. Some people, these cases, they eat at them. Like one of the questions, was, does any of the cases still eat at you? And yeah, it does, but we did everything we could. Sometimes you're not going to always solve it. So, oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anything else before we let you go? What's that?
On your case, did you guys always go to Walmart?
Oh, Walmart?
Yes, the criminals always check out Walmart.
Oh, on the one case, the Matthew Hoffman case.
And they get their equipment.
And the way the guy that I just told about dismembered the two women, the young boy, we found during crime scene processing a bag from Walmart with a receipt on it. And it was date and time stamped. We went to Walmart and pulled up, had the security folks pull up the video for that. And we see this man, turned out to be Matthew Hoffman, go and purchase the tarps and the garbage bags, walk up to the cashier. He picked up like a Halloween shirt or some goofy thing like that. But he pays with cash, which was bad because we didn't have a credit card receipt. But we were able to follow him out by the surveillance video outside the Walmart, saw him get into a very unique car. And we were able to run that information. And the shirt, when we pulled up this individual, Matthew Hoffman's BMV, Bureau Motor Vehicle image, he's wearing the same shirt as what he has on in the Walmart. What are the chances of that? So. Well, there's other, well, maybe Walmart should run with that. We're the home of the serial killers.
Me and Cindy have talked about this, the Nancy Guthrie case. They need to go to Walmart and check.
Well, I'm sure they've checked it out every time that they can. All right, listen. Thank you all.